Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming at you with my December TBR. This is the last TBR of the year. I'm so overwhelmed by that idea, that concept. If you've seen any of my other TBR videos, you'll see that I like to treat TBRs as more of like a curated like mini library. I get really overwhelmed just looking at all the books I have on my shelves and like just choosing what to read next. So if I can pick out like a smaller selection of books to choose from, that's really helpful for me. So I don't expect to get through all of these within the month. Anywho, I think that's all I have to say to preface this. Let me know what you're reading this month, and I think I'll just get started then. Starting with the physical books, I have The Abominable by Dan Simmons. This is a historical adventure kind of mystery horror novel. I think it takes place in the 1920s, and a few people have gone missing climbing Mount Everest, and a group of people have been hired by this older woman to like go find out what happened to her son. And on the trek up climbing Mount Everest, there is some being following our main characters. So I'm hoping it's like a monster type book. I personally love like monster horrors, but I obviously don't know what happens. It seems really interesting. It is very long, so if I'm in the mood for a tome for something that might take me a while, I have this. I have also seen that it's pretty thrilling and like maybe not necessarily fast paced, but you get through it pretty quickly because of like the thrills. Obviously, since it's set on Mount Everest, there's going to be like chilly, like really cold, wintry vibes. I'm hoping that this book gives me those like unputdownable feelings where like you can't put down the book because you have to keep reading and see what happens next. I hope that's what happens here, which would be really great to get through like this chunk of a book. I think it's over, it's just over 600 pages, so for like the winter December vibes, I also have The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This is a pretty popular fantasy. I want to say it's adult fantasy, but in this book we follow a young woman named Vasilisa, and Vasilisa has grown up with these kind of Russian inspired like folklore, folk tales, and after her mother passes away and after her father remarries, her stepmother kind of forbids her from I guess talking about these folklore stuff. So I guess she's kind of cut off from that part of her heritage, her childhood, what have you. And I'm not sure where like the magical element comes in, but I have heard that the atmosphere of this is so like perfectly cold. And on top of that, it's a fantastic trilogy from what I heard. So that's pretty much why I put it on this TBR. So for more winter vibes, I also picked up Winter Song by S.J. Jones. This is I think it's a reimagining of Labyrinth with David Bowie, which I personally haven't seen. But if you've read this book and you've seen Labyrinth and you think I should watch it before this, I mean, obviously you probably should since it's a retelling, but like the summary of it itself sounds pretty cool. Like I don't feel like I have to watch the film. In this book, our main character Liesel has heard stories of the Goblin King, and she's very much like entranced by this figure that in her mind is fiction. But as she grows older, her sister actually gets taken by the Goblin King, and she goes down to the underworld or wherever he is, the underground, to save her sister. That's pretty much all I know. I'm hoping to get again some wintry vibes. I have also heard like Cruel Prince vibes, which I haven't read, but I know that's like a booktube darling basically. So I actually did start reading this once upon a time a while ago, but I only went through the first chapter before I had to put it down for like school reasons. So this past month I started the Abortion trilogy, starting with Surreal by Garth Nix. So I want to pick up Surreal by Garth Nix. Obviously this is the second book in the Abortion series, so I don't think this book follows Surreal. Actually, our main character from the last book, this follows another character. In the first book, our main character Surreal is a necromancer, and her father has gone missing. He's been like captured basically, and using her necromancy abilities, Surreal has to like go find her father and rescue him in this old kingdom, which is very much like your typical like medieval setting, which is really interesting because the world that everyone else lives in, most people don't live in the old kingdom. Most people live in the southern country, which is very modern with like a police force, military, like technological achievements, electricity, stuff like that. But in the Old Kingdom, where this series takes place, it's very much like older medieval vibes. So that's really interesting kind of like dichotomy going on there. This book follows a character who is supposed to have the sight, which is essentially like foretelling future events. And it looks like she doesn't have that ability yet, or if she ever will. But yeah, it's a pretty cool setting, interesting story going on here. So I'd like to continue it on before I forget everything. So using my Kindle Unlimited subscription, I'd like to continue on reading Sovereign Sacrifice. This is the 4th novel in the Vortex Chronicle series by Elise Kova. I've already started reading this, but I haven't finished it. So obviously I want to finish it pretty soon. It's kind of hard to describe the series every time I talk about it because it's like a sequel series to her Air Awakens series. I loved Air Awakens. I'm not loving this series as much. There's something about Air Awakens that was so like compelling and fast paced and very endearing, and I feel like this series is like still that, but like at a much lower level. So this series basically takes place after the events of Air Awakens, and in the series we follow a crown princess, and she has been basically taken away from her family to be raised in another part of the country, not the capital. This part of the country has a lot of like political turmoil from previous events that happened in the Air Awakens series, so she has never really fit in this place where she's grown up. She hasn't been able to live with her mother and father, the king and queen, and she's never met her twin at the beginning of the series. And that's pretty much like the setting and where the story is so far. This world also has elemental magic. Our main character has not awoken in terms of her elemental magic. She doesn't have any at the beginning of the series, but then she realizes that she has certain magic that is very different from everyone else, and that magic kind of sets her off on this adventure. It's very vague, but it is a sequel series and I don't want to spoil anything. I mentioned in another, I think, review wrap-up that the series would have been much better if it was kind of condensed into a really large bind-up, like a pretty like long Priory of the Orange Tree as kind of just huge chunker of a book, because the first and second books in the series kind of felt like a lot of build-up, and I wasn't getting like huge payoff until like the second half of the second book, and even then it was not like a huge kind of satisfaction, I guess. Kind of a letdown, but I love Elise Kova's writing and I love her world, so I'm kind of like compensating here. I'm already, I want to say like 30-40% through this book, so I should finish it somewhat soon, hopefully. And since the year is ending, I might as well try to finish the series with Crystal Cage, which is the last book in the Vortex Chronicle series. So it's definitely doable. I just have to like not procrastinate on like finishing the series, because that's another thing that I've noticed with these books, that every time I put it down like to take a break, I don't always want to pick it back up. I have to be in the specific mood. So yeah, but hopefully I can finish up the series with Crystal Cage and move on to her other books. I'd also like to continue the King Fountain series with The Hollow Crown. This is the 4th book in the King Fountain series by Jeff Wheeler. The beginning of the series was very much inspired by the War of the Roses era in England, so it has very much those like political vibes. It's very like political intrigue heavy, and book 4 takes place after a huge time jump between book 3 and book 4. A lot of time has passed by, and I can't really give a huge summary of like this book because I don't want to spoil anything, but essentially in this world there is this King Fountain. It's like this entity that gives certain people gifts, magical abilities. For example, there's this baker in this world that whenever he like bakes a loaf of bread, the King Fountain magic that he's been blessed with creates another loaf, if that makes sense. Some people have like the gift of sight, so on and so forth. In the first book we follow a young boy named Owen, and Owen's father was the lord of a certain territory in the country, but when there was this like uprising rebellion, Owen's father didn't immediately pick the king's side, or he didn't pick any side. He was kind of like seeing where to throw his chips in, and when the king won the rebellion, this is again at the beginning of the first book, the king was very like cross with Owen's father and kind of punished him, and as punishment the king took Owen from his family and raised him as like his ward. And the king wasn't a very nice man, and we see Owen come into his own in the first 3 books of the series. Again, some time has passed since book 3, which is like a good stopping point if you're interested in the series, which is why it took me so long to continue on. I thought I ended off that trilogy in a good place. I love Jeff Wheeler's writing. I think he is such an underrated author. He's not super popular. You can find most of his books on Kindle Unlimited, but yeah, it's a really great like medieval standard fantasy, but with really unique concepts. I've also read his Harbinger series, which you're not supposed to read before the Kingfound series. I didn't know that going in. Really great books, really great writing. I recommend his books to everyone. Yeah, I love them so much. Now I want to get to some of the audiobooks that I have coming in from my library. Some I already have. But before I do that, let me just quickly talk about Silverborn by Patricia Briggs. This is the 5th book in the Mercy Thompson series. I've already finished this series. I finished it today, December the 4th. This series follows our main character, Mercy Thompson, who's a mechanic who works on like German cars mostly. It's not super relevant, I just like remember that. But Mercy Thompson is half Native American. Her father was part of the Blackfeet Nation, and she can turn into a coyote at will. This is a paranormal like urban fantasy series. In this world, certain species have started to like come out of the urban fantasy closet, specifically werewolves and fae. Vampires have not. Ghosts do exist in this world, but for now it's werewolves and fae. I think that's a really cool concept because we usually just see either these creatures not being known to the public, or in books they've already been established that they exist. Either way, I kind of like this transition period, and that by no means is like the main part of the story. Each book follows like an individual plot. So our main character, Mercy, gets involved in a lot of mysteries, some crimes, what have you, and she's also pretty well connected to the local werewolf pack. I really enjoy the series. It's very much like in the vein of Sookie Stackhouse type novels. I think Mercy Thompson's a more like competent narrator. I personally didn't like Sookie Stackhouse. I thought she was a dumb bitch, but Mercy Thompson's pretty cool. I believe I have the next book called Rivermark. This is book 6, coming in soon. I don't have it yet, but it should be in within the month. I also have Star Wars Dooku Jedi Lost by Cavan Scott. These are one of the books in the Star Wars like literary world. I think this is one of the like earlier ones in the timeline. Obviously it's about Dooku. I'm not sure if it's before or after certain events. Yeah, I've been wanting to read some of these like I've been wanting to read some of these. I'm sorry, my dog's making me laugh. I've been wanting to read some of these Star Wars novels for a while now, and my library had like all of them mostly on audiobooks, so I'm just gonna pick them up instead of like waiting to get physical copies because there's a lot. I also have Escaping from Houdini by Carrie Maniscalco. This is the 3rd book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. I had already started reading this, but I never finished it before my loan ran out. I'm about 65% of the way through this. This is a historical YA series. There's no fantasy. I thought there was fantasy when I went into this, but this is a historical series about Audrey Rose, who has dreams of being like she wants to study forensics, who wants to do like autopsies on people. Obviously this is the Victorian era, and she can't because she's a woman, but she does have certain connections which allow her to find a path to this success. And in this book she's obviously in some sort of situation having to do with the escape artist Harry Houdini, and that's pretty much it. Each book kind of follows a kind of notorious figure, Jack the Ripper, Dracula. The last book is called Capturing the Devil, something like that. I think if you go into the series expecting kind of like a very basic urban mystery series, I think you'll be fine. I had heard so much ravings about the series, but it's like pretty much just okay. I used to dislike the romance. Now I'm kind of like indifferent to it, so I guess it kind of got better, but it's also still not like great. But I'm already this far into it, so I might as well like continue on. I also have The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Leventhal. This is like the third time I've checked out this book, and my loan always kind of like lapses over. So our main character wants to seduce marry this king, so she can be queen, and then she wants to kill him for her, you know, own gain. But he has other enemies other than herself, so she also has to like protect him so she could eventually kill him. But I've heard this is a really entertaining, like dark-ish romance. I want to read more dark romances. I think they're really thrilling. I also have another like booktube darling an audiobook, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is an LGBT, specifically male-male romance. That was pretty popular, still is pretty popular. This romance is basically between the son of the president, who's also a woman in this world, and the son of the queen, I want to say, or the grandson of the queen. I've heard mostly like great things. I haven't heard any like super negative things about this. I know I'm not like the best romance reader. I feel like I enjoy romances more going into a book knowing that like the main purpose of the book is romance. Like that's like it's a romance novel, so hopefully I enjoy this. If you're watching this, you've probably already heard about this book. I'm just barely getting around to reading it. I wanted like a fun kind of upbeat kind of romance for the holiday season. I like watching romances this time of the year, so when I saw this had no hold on it, I just like picked it up myself. So in 2 weeks I also have another Star Wars novel, Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray. This one is about Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi while Obi-Wan was still a Padawan, so I guess we're going to see some of that growing Master Padawan relationship. Obi's one of my favorite characters, so I'm sure I'll enjoy this. And last but not least, I have An Arc of Lore by Alexandra Bracken. This is a YA fantasy. In this world, every, I want to say 9 years, certain specific Greek gods are sent down to Earth to be hunted by members of like ancient like families, bloodlines. Our main character Lore is being assisted by a friend who she thought was dead, as well as Athena. I'm not sure which god she's hunting down, but together this trio are gonna hunt down a god, and that's pretty much all I know. I feel like there's like a lot more story-wise, plot-wise than what like the synopsis is leading on, which I'm happy about. I don't want to like get spoiled. Again, this one comes out January 4th from Disney Publishing Group. I will probably do a dedicated review for this one as it's an arc, but I've already started seeing reviews and I've heard that it's entertaining. I heard it's good, so hopefully I enjoy it as well. And those are all the books that I'm looking to read this month. Let me know what you think of like any of the books that I mentioned. Sorry if you heard a lot of noise. My dogs only ever apparently make noise when I'm like filming. Thank you so much for watching. I will link all my social medias down below. Feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.